Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 193 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. I am an artist. Well, actually, I've always thought of myself as a photographer, but one of the dilemmas that photographers have encountered over the century and a half or century and three quarters since photography was invented, photographers have encountered this problem about whether photography is an art. Many of you I know have listened to my History of Photography podcast, where that struggle to be recognized as an art is part of a big struggle in the history of the medium that we love and that we practice. Historically, photographers have longed to be taken seriously. And the dilemma that photographers who want to be creatively expressive have is that the central device in their lives is a machine that, when pointed at a particular thing, makes a copy of it, takes a picture of that thing. So due to that device, the camera, photographers have always been a little nervous about saying that what they do is art. Look at this. We hear this all the time, right? We certainly see it all the time on Instagram and on Flickr and so forth. People say, look at this. This is exactly the way it looked when I saw it. There was no darkroom trickery or, they fill in the blank, Photoshop or Lightroom or Instagram filters, etc. That Instagram hashtag no filter, because that somehow denotes that it's real, right? And because it's a photograph, there is this impulse on the part of the viewer that the image should be real. We tend to get a little nervous if somebody says to us as the photographer, is this real? You must have used Photoshop on this, because we understand that it's a photograph and therefore it has to be of something in the real world. But because we're photographers, we know that there's a fairly wide range of options available to us that change what was into what it is that we show the world in our photographs. And, it's not just the digital age that brings this problem to us. This has been along for our ride ever since the beginning of the medium. I remember way back many years ago when I was teaching a class in color photography, where all of the output that students did was in color slide or color transparency film. And at the very beginning of the class, the very first class after we talked a little bit about what we'd be doing and that it was all about color and all about transparency film, a student came up to me and said, or raised their hand and said, hey, what's the most accurate film? What's the film that I should buy? If I'm going to go out and buy 20 rolls of film, what's the one that will give me the real colors of the world? The real colors of the world. And I said, there isn't one. And they looked at me like I was like some sort of crazy person. The idea that film should be able to capture the way the real world looks. But of course, it can't, it couldn't in that set of circumstances. The Fuji film and the Ektachrome film, I guess coming back now, right? Ektachrome film, Fuji film, the Kodachromes, all of them had their own way of interpreting the way the real world looked in photographs. And of course, every photograph that we make, whether it's a film photograph or a digital photograph, is a composite of the choices we make as the person who eventually presents the image. Every photograph is an interpretation of the way the world really looks. When you hold a camera, you are in a sense holding a set of choices. And the question is not, will you be selective, but rather, what will you select? What's the thing you're going to select out of all the stuff in the world? What are you going to select? And every time you put the camera to your eye and aim it at a subject and frame and focus and press the shutter release button, you're making a set of choices. And in that set of choices, you're prioritizing one thing above another. And the dilemma, of course, is going back to the beginning, Are we artists? Are we artists? And again, I tend to think of myself more as a photographer than an artist. I suppose perhaps I have the notion that some of what I produce is art in some way. But like every other artist, we have a set of choices that we make. A set of choices that we make when we decide, first of all, what to photograph, then how to photograph it, and then later on in post-production in a dark room or in a computer to figure out what it is that we're going to show someone of what it is that we photograph. So I suppose that if we're making the same sorts of choices that other visual artists make, selecting a subject, selecting a point of view of that subject, thinking about what we want to say about the subject, and then ultimately choosing what to show a viewer and how that image will look to them, I suppose that we're artists. But please, let's just call ourselves photographers, okay? Hey, thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.